All right, why don't you tell me about your childhood?
Okay. When I was my first memories of childhood, we lived on top of a corner grocery store in downtown Baltimore. So I was probably a little younger than 3 years old. I remember my father used to take a fly and pull the wings off and put it on the high chair and have me play with it. I also remember that one time, well, we used to watch Howdy Doody up there. I remember that. I broke my leg up there because I was running in to watch TV and we didn't have carpeting on the floor, so I slid into a chair. That was the only bone I've ever broken in my life that I know of. One time I went outside and it was a big full moon and I ran up and down the street trying to lasso the moon. I remember that. The neighborhood there was 90% African American, so we were the only like white kids in the neighborhood, which meant nothing to me. It was just, it was. We had our friends, and that was that. Um, we moved to Howard Park Avenue, and that's where, as I say, like the wonder years started. I was a little over 3 years old. Our house was one of the first houses built, so I could kind of run around and watch the houses being built. I do remember that I had gotten new tennis shoes, and they were on the end of the street. They were putting tar down on the street, and I sat on the curb and watched and thought it was really cool. Till I got home and found out that my shoes were covered with tar, and my mother went ballistic. But anyway, but most of the time in that neighborhood, once it filled up with other families, there was a lot of kids. Um, Most were a year or two older than me, so they were actually closer to my older brother's age than me. And there weren't any as young as my younger brother. But we all did everything together. Nobody locked their doors. It's one of those typical stories you hear. Nobody locked their doors. Every parent was called Aunt so and so or Uncle so and so. If you happened to be at our house at lunchtime, you had lunch at our house. If you happened to be at somebody else's house, you had lunch. When both my parents had to work, when they were both working at the store, they could count on the neighbors to keep an eye on us and watch us. But we all played, we played in the street, whether it was, you know, baseball, football, um, Red Rover, Spud, all those kind of things. We would draw hopscotch things on the sidewalk, and it was like all day and all night. That's kind of what we did. At night, you went in for dinner, you had dinner, you came back out, and you played hide and seek or snipers, which was just army. And and then your parents called you in and you went to sleep. There was no air conditioning. I think I've mentioned this before. We had a big window fan downstairs that would pull the air in from all the windows that were open in the house, and that was air conditioning. We didn't even know what air conditioning was when we were kids. I shared a room with my younger brother, my older brother, because he was older, had his own room. It was a little room. Um, and their dog slept between our two beds, you know. But it was just a really really nice childhood with the typical, you know, the guy with the whip would come down the street and we'd try and get our parents to give us a dime to ride on the whip. The ice cream man would come down the street and we tried to get our parents to give us money for ice cream, which by the way, everybody else got 15 cents for ice cream. Our family got 10 cents for ice cream. In fairness, there were three of us. Um, but it was not stressful at all. I mean, our backyard was tiny, but it was overflowing with honeysuckle. At night, we caught lightning bugs in a jar. It was just like a Norman Rockwell kind of thing. I didn't think about it that way as a kid. That was just my childhood. The first bike I ever got as a kid, my parents, and we didn't understand what it meant that we didn't really have a lot of money. Um, they got me a bike that had airless tires. They were just solid rubber tires, which was the hardest bike in human history to pedal. But that's all they could afford. They didn't want to have to replace tires and everything. So I remember when I first got my first real bike with real tires, I would ride it everywhere because I couldn't believe how easy it was to ride a bike. And then, I started spreading my wings a little bit. I would ride all the way down to Gwinnett Junction, which was kind of a hangout down there for several different neighborhoods. And the movie theater was down there, and friends from school were down there. For the first little while, my brother, because he was older, he went to school, elementary school, before I did, and I had to stay home because I was younger, and there were no kids my age in the neighborhood, so I was pretty much alone. Um, and I did stupid stuff. One day, I knew my mother had like this sprinkler thing that she put water on the clothes while she was ironing, and I took it and filled it with water. And I was determined I was going to make the kids, when they came home from school, believe that it rained on our street. And I just ran up and down the street, sprinkling water and filling it up and sprinkling water. Didn't work very well. But, I found things to do. I guess that's probably when I really got into reading. I loved to read as a kid. And so, but at the time, it was mostly comic books at the beginning. And I did have, once I started elementary school, I had friends that I traded comic books with. And, I would meet them at a corner that was between their neighborhood and ours, and we would trade comic books out, that kind of thing. What else? I got an aquarium when I was younger because I really was interested in that. And that was one thing I remember my father actually being interested in. He found it very calming, and we didn't do many things together because he was always working. But, my childhood was really a great childhood. I have absolutely no complaints. The only time I ever got punished that I remember from my parents was when me and Mark and Barry went to get our haircuts down at Gwinnett Junction. And Barry was the last one to get his haircut, and we wanted to get home. So Mark and I just left him there and told him to walk home. And we had always learned that you have to stop at a corner and don't cross the corner by yourself. And so next thing we know, Barry showed up with a policeman because he had come to an alley and wouldn't cross it. And the policeman brought him home. And so my parents came home from work and found out from the neighbors that there was a police car and all that. So anyhow, yeah, we got punished for that. That was a big punishment. We were like grounded for a few days. The only second time I remember getting punished was I got one of those bow and arrow sets with suction cups, and I laid on the ground just shooting it into the ceiling, and it left marks all over the ceiling from the arrows. So my mother grounded me for a few days for that. But other than that, there was no real drama. The biggest drama was the rumor went around that there was a bike thief in the area. And so one night when we were playing hide and seek, everybody thought they spotted the bike thief, and that was the big drama. As we got a little bit older, in elementary school still, the big drama was that the first African American child was going to be coming to our school. And it wasn't really drama for us as kids, it was drama for parents. Everybody's parents were going nuts that was happening. And she came to the school, that was it, nothing big happened. It was just a big to-do. Everybody was upset that it was happening. But we never even gave it a thought. As I said, we were brought up in a 90% African-American neighborhood. And, she was just another person that came to the school. And I guess, elementary school for me was really a shaping experience, I guess, starting with my third grade teacher was the one that really encouraged me reading and writing. And she would, I told you, I think I said, I wrote my first story I wrote called My Dog Ginger, was published in the Howard Park school newspaper, and I thought that was like the greatest thing in the world. But then I started writing outlandish science fiction stories. Whatever I could think of adding to a monster, whether it was 27 eyes or 15 legs, that got added. But every time that teacher read my story, she just said, "This is really interesting. You have quite an imagination." And that's the way she always put it. You have quite an imagination. And she used to have contests. She called it the Good English Club. So if somebody said something and didn't use proper English, the first one to raise their hand and pick it out would get a ribbon. And I always wanted to be the guy that got the ribbons. And so I was always correcting people, which probably didn't go over very well. But she was just a very encouraging kind of person. And then I started liking to read as well, and the bookmobile, that was the first time the bookmobile came into the neighborhood. My mother did used to take us to the library, which was several miles away before that, and give us a chance to pick out books. But when the bookmobile came and I had my own library card, I could go whenever I wanted and pick up books. It started primarily with sports star books, the story of their life, biographies and stuff. But then I got into anything and everything, and I was always reading. Still was reading comic books, but always reading other books. And kids would be outside playing, and I would be sitting up in my room reading. And I just loved to read. It really took off for me, and I just really enjoyed it. And that was my life, because nobody cared if I didn't happen to come outside at a certain time. I would come in and read. So until I got to, like, I think the first stress I ever had was probably junior high school, because grades really counted then. In elementary school, the only time I really was sad, I guess, was at the very end in the 6th grade. All of my friends got selected to be in the accelerated course. And I was the only one, not the only one of a few kids that didn't get accepted. I had no idea about IQ tests at the time and how these kids got selected. I just thought I was being left out. And so they were skipping a grade, and they were going to start junior high a grade ahead. So that was kind of hurtful. But when I got to junior high, that's when I realized again that it was about grades, and it was about a competition for grades, because they listed your classes based on how, in our mind, how smart or dumb you were. So if I was in class 711 and somebody else was in 712, they were smarter than me. So the problem was that even though I knew grades mattered, I didn't care. All I cared about by that time, all I cared about was sports. Any sport, any kind. I do remember my older brother was forced to take me with his friends when they played softball. Just one time he had to take me, because they didn't know what to do with me. And they needed an extra guy, and they stuck me in the outfield. And I found out I was pretty great. And I had never played in Little League, and my father had never had the time to have catches with me. I just had time to have catches with my brothers and everything. But I was never into organized sports or anything like that. But they stuck me out there, and the balls were hit, and I could catch just about anything. I was faster than most of the kids. And from that point on, I was really into sports. And my older brother, the only time we were really close, I would say, was we would invent games in the street, hitting games, where he would hit as far as he could hit, I would hit as far as, and we had to field the other. And so I would learn to really catch and run and stuff like that. And then I was constantly throwing the ball against our front steps. I was constantly playing step ball with my younger brother or whoever would play. And then on the side of our house was just a giant brick wall, and I would throw the ball against the brick wall and catch the ball. And between that and then when the Colts won their first championship game in 1958, which was a huge game for a lot of people in a lot of ways. But I remember how interested my father was in it. I had never even thought of a football game professional. But he climbed up in the bathroom and hung an antenna. We couldn't get the network channel that it was on. Hung an antenna outside of the bathroom window, and we huddled around the TV, which was all snowy and in and out and everything. But I was hooked. I mean, that was it. Football was it for me. I wanted to be a professional football player. And so, I was into all kinds of sports. The only, thing I did with my older brother, we would take the bus down to Memorial Stadium and watch the baseball games, watch the Orioles and everything, back when it was safe to do that as two kids our age. My other brother, younger brother, was never, I don't know what Barry was doing all that time, to be honest with you. He had his own life, and I don't know what it was. But, you know, we had our little spats around the house. You know, Mark, as he got to be the bigger brother, kind of bullied me and Barry. And we would try and call my parents at the grocery store, and he'd let us get to the last number on the phone, and then he'd hang it up on us. And then I learned from him, and I used to drop things on my younger brother Barry when he would come home from school. Our bathroom window was at the top story, and I would stay up there and I would throw water balloons at him when he came home from school and walked under the window. Little things like that. But I think we were all pretty good kids and we had a pretty good life. And again, junior high school started stress. It was a time when, as I said, grades mattered. You were more in competition with other kids as to how smart or dumb you were. And I say dumb like we weren't really dumb, but that was what was going through our head. Those of our heads who were just in class 7-11 instead of 7-12. And so I've just focused on sports. Grades meant nothing to me. I know they meant something, but to me, I just went to school and I was in my own world. I was able to, when they graded your notebooks, as they did back then, I would wait till the very day before I knew that she was going to collect our notebooks. I'd get a big thing of paper and I'd rewrite my entire notebook that night in the neatest handwriting that no kid would ever really write their notebooks, and put a nice cover on it and turn it in, and I always got an A on my notebook, even though I never really kept a good notebook. And I guess I had some natural smarts because, I was probably a low B student in junior high school. And then I guess growing out of childhood, what really stressed me was a counselor at the junior high school. For some reason, on some test, I must have scored high in math, which amazes me because I hate math, everything about it. And she told me I should go to Poly, which was an engineering school, instead of City, where all my friends were going. And Poly, not only was it an engineering school, but you had to have a 70 to pass, and that was the passing grade there. And it was all math and science, and I hated every second of that 1 year that I was there. I got my final grade in algebra was 65, and where everybody else would have passed, at Poly a 70 was passing, I had to go to summer school, and that was a big embarrassment. I used to have to take we moved, at that time we moved out to Randallstown. I used to have to drive my bike halfway to the other side of Randallstown to a friend's house who had moved there, and they let me keep my bike there, and then I'd walk like another mile to a bus stop, catch a bus, go all the way downtown to City College where the summer school classes were, take the class and repeat the same thing coming home, and do that 3 or 4 days a week until I passed algebra. And finally, so I passed, and then I thought, great, I'm going to go to Milford Mill High School, where again, all of my friends were going. We went, my father took me to sign up, and they said, you are 1 block out of the range of Milford Mill's territory. You have to go to Franklin High School. Well, we had never heard of Franklin High School, and they gave my father directions. And it was out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we drove and drove and drove, and I said to him, I'm not going here. There's nobody that I know here. I'm not going here. And, it just took forever to get there. And he finally said, you don't have any choice. They're telling us you have to go here. And, by then my older brother was already, he was already getting ready to go to college, so he didn't have to worry about it. My younger brother wasn't high school age yet. And so, I ended up having to go to this stupid school. At the time, I thought it was. I did find out the first time I caught the bus that there were a whole bunch of kids that lived in our development and a whole bunch of Jewish kids that lived in our development. And we all sat with our glum faces on the bus for 40 minutes or however long it took. And at the time, there was nothing out there. I mean, there was a Twin Kiss was the burger joint or whatever. And I mean, nothing else. And so, you know, went out there. I made the football team. I was like one of the last people to make the team. They took a bunch of us out. And he said, okay, you're like the last 15 or 20. I'm going to let 3 of you make the team. You weren't the first picks. And I forgot, you know, I hit a blocking dummy better than anybody else. And you know, I made the team. And that was a big deal for me, even though I was like 3rd string, rarely got to play. But in any case, but high school again was just a repeat of junior high school, and that grade started to count. I really did not know how to approach girls or anything like that. I was fortunate in that I made 2 friends fairly quick, one on the bus on the way, that's Jerry, on the way to school, and one at school, because I had blue Jack Purcell's tennis shoes, and he looked at me and said, where did you get those? Because everybody else in the world wore white Jack Purcell's tennis shoes. And we just got to be friends, and as you know, they're still my friends today, best friends, very close friends. So anyway, I guess that takes us to, you know, through my childhood, I guess. And we can talk about college later, but that's basically it.